Hi, everyone, and welcome to Funny TV, the Travel Tech channel. It's Monday, it's 3 o'clock, and today we start a new episode of Master Learning from Leaders. We are going to talk about predictive analytics, and we have two great guests, Juanjo Rodriguez, the CEO of the Hotels Network, and Scott Dahl from Roches Global Hospitality. So let me welcome them on board. Hi, Juanjo.
Hello,
Hi,
Enzo.
Scott. Good afternoon, guys. How are you?
Hi, Enzo. Hi, Juanjo.
Good.
So welcome in LinkedIn Live on Funnel TV. Today we have this very cool guest. Scott is sitting in New York, Juanjo in Barcelona, right?
Yeah, correct.
That's right.
Fantastic.
You said good afternoon, but it's good morning for me. But anyway,
Yeah.
True. You're right. Right, guys. So before we start the session, would you like to give us a quick overview about the Hotels Network, Juanjo, and then also you, Scott, a little bit about Le Roche Hospitality? Yep.
Yeah, sure.
Let's go ahead.
So we are technology company serving hotels and providing them with tools to improve their direct business. So anytime they connect directly with the guest to empower direct bookings, increase ADR, increase ROI, that would be under our scope.
Okay, fantastic. So direct revenue is a must today, right? For hoteliers, it's becoming since a long time. Actually, it's not something new, but
No, correct. It's nothing new under the sun. The idea that hotels have to establish a relationship with the guest and as frequent as that's direct instead of going through a third party, the better for them. And one of the key ideas that we try to build our company on is the idea of personalization. That the same as a hotel stay is the maximum experience is when you have a personalized experience, something that is completely different from you but someone else. We try to apply that to everything about the business of actually getting those bookings.
Cool. Right, Scott, what about you? Tell us a little bit about Le Roche.
well, I don't normally sit in New York. I normally have the great fortune of sitting in the mountains of Switzerland in a beautiful place. Le Roche is currently the number 3 hotel school in the world, according to the QS ranking systems. And I recently went there to put together a master's degree in hospitality strategy and digital transformation that we'll begin offering in the fall, which allows me, very fortunately, to kind of run around in circles that I get to, for example, attend the HSMAI meeting last week and had an opportunity to hear Juanjo speak, which was fantastic, and a bunch of other experts as well. So now we're just, I think, educating and influencing the hoteliers of the future is a good way to think of it. So,
Cool, right. So I think we are ready to start. Juanjo, let me share your screen so you can go through your contents and make people happy today to make more direct revenue.
Great.
Let's go ahead.
Great. So Scott, do you want to start or?
Yeah, you bet, Juanjo. We had the opportunity. I'll ask you a couple of questions before you start your slides. We had the opportunity to visit a little bit, and I had the opportunity to hear you present machine learning to a very large group. Interestingly, a very diverse group, and I think it was amazing the way you were able to present it in a way that held the interest of the people that understand it quite well, and yet not confuse the people that don't understand it quite well. The word I would use was elegant, to be honest with you. So I'm looking forward to having you share that with everyone. But what is Hotel Net? You mentioned it a little bit, but what is the Hotel Network? What do you guys do? What is that? What is the Hotel Network?
So basically, we offer a set of software tools that you can add to your existing website and booking engine to empower that booking experience. So we want to help you find the users that can become guests, then help convert them and help engage them throughout the booking experience. So basically, when you are selling directly to that end user, to the traveler, instead of going through third parties, be that OTAs, wholesalers, whatever that is, when you go direct, we empower the experience. And we do that basically by adding a set of tools that help convince the user that he came to the right place, that if he came to the website of the hotel, that's the good hotel for him. That's the perfect one. And then he will be able to book it there in better conditions than anywhere else. And that's a combination of helping make it easy to reduce friction in that booking process, and then personalizing the booking experience so that you can find what you are looking for.
Cool. And let me add, this is, if there is such a thing, what does that mean
Mm-hmm.
you do on a normal day? What's your normal day like?
So now we are, so the world in a tech company is a combination, is basically two things. You build something and then you tell people about it so that they can actually buy it from you. And that's how you make money, right? We are a B2B company in the sense that our clients are hotel chains and hotel groups. So I spend about probably half of my time with the product team building the set of tools, both working on what we have already, but also thinking quite a bit about what's coming next. Because one of the great things about being in tech in hospitality is that there are so many opportunities to do things. There are so many places in which hoteliers can get better tools to both make their job easier, but also more powerful. And then the other 50% of my time would be working with the sales, client success, account management, and marketing teams to ensure that when we tell our story, it's easy to understand, and we can really deliver value to our clients. So it basically becomes obvious that we can be a good partner for any hotel group.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I got into the hotel business with a really thin thread. I happen to speak Spanish. I thought it would be super sexy to stand at the front desk and be bilingual. If anyone knows anything about the hotel industry in the United States, that means that the minute I graduated from the university, I went directly to housekeeping. But tell me, how did you get into it? What got you started?
So I'm relatively new to hospitality in the sense that it's been within the last 7-8 years that I came to the industry, because my previous expertise was more in technology and marketing and sales. And basically, I came because I thought it was a super interesting area as an industry, which is first, that is really a fun place to be in. Obviously, it's much better to be selling experiences, and the idea of a trip and traveling around the world is so much more interesting than just selling some boring back-end furniture or whatever that is, with all respect for the people who do that. And then there's this specific situation in the hotel industry where you have all of the providers of the service, the hotels themselves, but the way to access your customers is through a layer of all kinds of these players that are trying to actually be the middleman. No? And therefore, there's a lot of space to help the real service providers build something interesting and basically learn from what the big players are doing and apply that to every single hotelier, be that an independent hotel or a chain of 300 hotels, because all of them are several X times smaller than any of the big guys, like the Expedias or Booking.coms of the world. And that connection between big technology to empower a process, but then a very real, very attractive service and experience in the hotel is what I thought it was really interesting.
Cool. So I know you've got some slides prepared for us. So let me ask you the question that starts those slides. What is machine learning? What is it in hospitality?
So basically, machine learning is actually a pretty simple thing. It's a way to learn from data and then apply that to whatever problem you're dealing with. So if you want me to move into the slides for a minute.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely share those with us.
Yeah. So basically, the idea here is nowadays we are generating in every industry huge volumes of data. What we do with machine learning is to use algorithms to extract value from that data. And that opens a whole world of new opportunities. It's not that the value we are looking for is different. So we still want more customers, lower cost, easy of use, whatever that is. So the problem stays the same. What changes now is that there's a new way to process that data to find things that to a human being are not obvious. So we were trying to find these patterns and ideas that are not obvious that then we can use in our day-to-day work. And I also like to mention what AI is not necessarily, because obviously there's AI in many things now. It's a bit of a buzzword, and we like to be very practical. And for example, robots, they have AI, but that's not only. And chatbots, you can build a chatbot with AI, but there are so many other things. So we don't like to equate AI with a specific use of it. It's a tool, like writing is a tool or design is a tool that you then apply to whatever problem you have. For example, if you go into something very our day to day, Spotify is a great example. Many of us use Spotify, either free or paid versions, and Spotify has this feature, the discovery list. So they offer you a list of songs that they think you are going to like, and they do that for hundreds of millions of people automatically. And you can only do that when you're using AI on the back end. You are trying to find these patterns between people, so that when you say you understand that a group of people behave in a certain way, you can learn from that and apply that to someone you've never seen before. So you can deliver quality, personalized quality on a scale, which is the hard thing. Because if I knew you, Scott, I could probably figure out, if I spent enough time with you, what type of music you want and give it to you. But I would never be able to replicate that process for 100 million people. There's another example that is very, very obvious, is Netflix, right? With Netflix, they try to show you shows that they think you're going to like based on what you've been seen before. This is very similar to the Amazon.com idea of people who bought this also would like that. In the case of Netflix, just recommending shows is quite obvious. It's actually this recommendation engine is one of the key uses of machine learning. But then the interesting thing about Netflix is they apply the machine learning idea to everything. For example, what we have in the screen is the show Stranger Things. So when they promoted that show, they didn't just have one cover and they promoted it with that cover. No, they created 50 different ones. And they displayed those covers to different people. And then by measuring where people click, how much time they spend actually watching the show, depending on the cover they were displayed to before, they can understand which are the covers and therefore the best way to tell the story. So the content is the same because the show doesn't change, but the way I tell you about the show changes. If you look at the 9 images on the screen, what they make an assumption is, well, if you are typically into romance, I may want to show you the one with the couple. But if you're into gore, for example, or mystery, then I may decide to do the one with a little droplet of blood. And then I learn if my guess is correct. So this interaction in making guesses and then trying to see if your guess is correct is core to machine learning. And it goes much deeper than just recommending something. For the title of today for the session was predictive analytics. When an example of what we do in our company, we try to predict user behavior in the booking process for a hotel. And so one of the things we do is we track over 100 different variables on what users want and what they are doing, how they behave. Interestingly enough, not necessarily who they are, but what they are doing as a predictor of future behavior. And then we apply a machine learning process to that, which is finding patterns by comparing the user that we are seeing now with every user that came before them. And with that, you can make predictions. And once you can predict behavior, then you can react to that behavior. That's where it really gets interesting. If you look at what's new here, really is that when you look from the tech perspective, up to now, engineers had to teach computers to do everything. So by definition, some human being had to teach the computer to do something and could only teach whatever they knew already. But now engineers build systems that enable computers to learn on its own, on their own. And therefore, they can learn some things that we don't understand yet. And that's how you find new insights, because it's not only teaching things, it's teaching the way to think and to discover new things. That's why one of the problems or maybe complexities of AI is that in many cases, the output is an algorithm that performs a task and does it very well, but you don't know why it happened. So it's a black box. So you know it's performing properly, but you don't know why. And that's hard for us humans to deal with.
For sure. We like transparency, especially in a super traditional industry. I think it's going to be very interesting for someone who even has fantastic insights from AI, in some cases, to explain them to some of the very traditional people that have moved through the business in other disciplines. when it's counterintuitive, because I think we tend to be very intuitive in hospitality, and so I think that must be very interesting to bring contrarian conclusions to people, and then not necessarily be able to show them exactly what the decision-making process is that got you there. That sounds like a huge challenge.
Yeah.
Related. Let me ask you a related question, if you don't mind. You mentioned in that context of what you mentioned, I went to the conference really kind of wondering if AI was eventually going to replace people. And then I think you did a very good job, and depending upon if it comes up, I'll share an example that Dr. Kelly McGuire shared with us that was a very cautionary tale of AI still needing some intervention, still needing some direction in those kind of things in terms of the conclusions we're looking for. How does that come into play in what you do?
So I think since the use of AI is a generic tool that you can apply to multiple problems, some of those problems make sense to be more machine-driven, in the sense that eventually a machine may be able to do most of, if not all of it. But in some other cases, it's absolutely impossible. And I think you cannot generalize saying AI will replace people or not. It depends on the specific use case. And in hospitality, there are many of those cases in the management of hotels in which that is clearly never going to happen. For once, we've never seen it yet in any industry. So I would be very cautious in saying AI is going to replace people.
No? Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. Finish it. Sorry.
I think the core idea for me is that AI empowers people. So it does things that you don't know how to do, and it does things quicker and takes away the part of the workload that you don't like, and therefore you're actually able to think, and that's when it becomes interesting. I think it's much better to be working powered by AI than without it.
Sure. The example that Dr. McGuire shared, I thought was very interesting. If you remember, it had to do with Amazon using AI to automate the screening process on resumes. And one of the things that they wanted to do was eliminate all gender bias from the screening process. And so they took gender out of the data. But because the machine was learning to kind of replicate the process that they had, and there apparently was a little bit of bias in their hiring up until then, the machine learning algorithm was actually going out and looking for things like women's colleges and the gender of names and some of those things to continue to fulfill what they had kind of would have been going on in the past that they were trying to eliminate.
Actually, you hinted to one thing that it's really key to all of it is, in general, when we as a society take a new tool, we try to improve our current processes with the tool, instead of building the new process that the tool enables. For example, if you have, you were 150 years ago and you had horses, and someone, the idea was when a car came out, the car is not a mechanic horse. It's a different thing that drives you somewhere else. So it's not putting a motor on a horse. And therefore, that is the same thing now. It's not, we don't have to replicate the current processes. We have to build new processes that were impossible before, but it will be better. And that's why it's really hard to imagine the future, because we are so influenced by our previous history and just tradition.
I mean, that's, I think, when we talk about disruption, that's what we really mean, right? As opposed to enhancement, really
exactly
through disruption.
Exactly. Yeah. Cool. Other thing too is that when talking about machine learning and AI, we are talking about probabilities. Nothing is never for sure, right? Actually, we have this quote here from one of the pioneers that essentially all of the models that the AI builds are wrong, but they can be useful. So they don't pretend to know exactly what's going on, but on average, the performance is very good. And therefore, you will always find holes in every model. And the people who build them are the first ones to realize this immediately. But if they become good, they are better than random, and therefore they can help you in your job. I think that's one of the key elements to think, that we have to learn not in black and white, but in shades of probability. I wanted to share a couple of examples of how this plays out in industries that are not ours. For example, the work with images has been great in the last few years. And you have this tool online that you can try, actually, in which you upload one of your photos, and then you choose a style, Impressionism, for example, and then the system automatically applies that style to the picture. And that's pretty easy to do now. this type of thinking that you want to get something, you give some input and you get an output, that's the way to think about all of this. The algorithm is the process that transforms something you give into something you want. But this algorithm in the middle, the style, is a decision by someone. So someone has to say, this is what I want. You're never going to get a beautiful picture out of a normal picture if you don't tell the system what beautiful is for you. That's why the human element is always there.
Cool.
And you can do this with still pictures, but then the amazing thing is you can do this with real life ones too. If we have a minute, I can share maybe a small video so that you guys can see what it looks like in real time. Let me see if we can see that, right? Basically, what you're looking at now is the ability of this program to, based on a few pictures of someone, replicate that someone talking, saying things he never said, right? And look at how great this is. Basically, you can build now a talking head of anyone saying anything based on just a few pictures of him. That has clearly implications for society. Basically, we can never believe anything we see anymore, because everything will be able to be faked and with little effort. Because look at this, I give the system just a few screenshots of a person and you can build a talking head of it in real time. You can be talking and the system can do that. In the example you have now on screen, it's just one photo of someone and you already have someone talking. The quality improves as you put more pictures. When the input is better, the quality of the output is also better. But in general, the quality is quite amazing.
Wow.
And yeah,
I think I might be betraying my age a little bit, but that's a little bit petrifying, to be honest with you.
Totally.
That's that easy to replicate what someone else does.
I totally agree. I think that's going to fundamentally change how we look at the world, because you can really never be sure that anything you are seeing actually happened. And therefore, there will be a whole new industry on helping us understand that. And either validating that or having a stamp of quality or approval or whatever that is, we don't know the format, but I'm sure that's going to be huge. Yeah. And then if we want to come back to our royal hospitality, then what I think is an interesting framework to look at this is, if we said machine learning and AI is a tool, then where can you apply that tool? And there are obviously two big areas: marketing and sales and revenue management. You can do that for operations too, but there is more about running things smoothly. When we go to the general revenue generating part of the business, then one thing is marketing, one thing is revenue. If you go to the marketing and sales, for example, and this is a framework that Google uses, you can apply this machine learning to every step. For example, if you go to number one, audience, you can try to find your ideal customers. Instead of you guessing who would be the right person that you should market to in order to bring him or her to your hotel, then you can use machine learning to find those ideal customers on a scale too, not just one of them, but actually an ending funnel of them, because you then connect to the marketing tools you're using to find them, be that Facebook, Google, display, whatever other things you're doing. Then creative is very important. When we saw the example from Netflix, you saw that the way you tell your story changes the perception of people about it. So if you can personalize your ads on a scale to the point that you could have a specific ad for each person, then the chance that those people want to engage with you is so much higher. And you can never have an agency creating 100,000 ads, but you can have a computer doing that. Number three would be personalization. Tell each person what they need to hear. Again, marketing is all about telling a story. And since we travel because we love the story of traveling, then it's totally on brand to personalize that story so that I convince you that my hotel is the right one for you and not other. And we are all different when we look for experience. So if you understand what people want and you can tell them in those words instead of just some conventional stereotypical marketing message, the chance that they will want to stay with you is much higher. And finally, just measure everything. Instead of just making guesses on what works, you can track what works and act on it. And measurement applies to every industry, I think. We are all aware at least in every single job I had, that there's so many things we don't know for sure, and we are making an estimate because there's nothing else available. Well, one of the clear uses of machine learning is to have that those metrics that are the right ones. That will be for marketing. And then the other big chunk is revenue management. And here you have everything from demand forecasting to identify trends and seasonality, improving in the accuracy of data. Dynamic pricing, basically optimize rates on the fly. You can have deal management, where you automate deal tactics for different segments. Advanced segmentation, apply clustering algorithms so that you understand that different people want different things and you can build your offer for them. And then finally, predictive personalization, which is actually our expertise, where you predict booking intent and then you can personalize the experience to try to change user behavior and have people book with you, right? I also find useful another framework, which is to understand AI as a way to answer questions. When we say that you need people to run with machine learning, not be substituted by, it's because every processing with machine learning means that you have an answer, you have a question that you are asking, and then you try to ask the algorithm that question and see if he can or it can come back to you with a proper answer. So there's no such a thing as having data and telling a machine, okay, learn about data and tell me. It's not how it works. You ask a question and then you get the answer to the question, but you can not say, find whatever question you think is interesting and tell me about it, because it doesn't make any sense. So to give you some of examples of stuff we are working on, for example, if you look at this list, when we look at someone who is on the booking process on the hotel website, we are asking the algorithms, is this user going to convert in this hotel, yes or no? What would be the ideal price for him? Which is a competitive set for this client and season? So what is this guy or woman comparing with? Will she pay for a cheaper room or for a more expensive one? Should I promote one specifically? What should we change in the property web experience to improve the probability of conversion? Or can we find other people like her that we can market to? So every one of those would be an algorithm that then has a performance that you can check against and improve. And the core idea here is to connect this with the business. It's not learning for the sake of learning. It's actually something that you think you can operate and therefore change something in the way you run the business, which, if it's true, will make you more money. So if you know the competitive set for everyone, can you change something in your offer or your pricing to get a higher share of those people? If that's the case, then you have started this machine learning process to see if you are able to discover that.
I think for someone who came up for revenue management like myself, this is really exciting. When I started in revenue management, there weren't a lot of variables. There weren't even OTAs, for those of you who want to know how long ago that was. Yeah. And so as big data, right, and it's kind of something that I always kind of put the bunny ears around, as big data became more and more available to us, the bigger issue for us was which data matters and which data doesn't matter. And as I started to understand a little bit more about AI, it was very exciting to me that at least there would be some help in terms of which of that data is useful and has a correlation to performance and which of that data is noise and not useful, instead of us having to simply figure out how to consider every single piece of new information in the decision-making process. So I think it's very cool that there's those kind of applications, especially in revenue for me. So.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. The other part of our work that we've been thinking quite a bit about is personalization, because clearly this idea that you can tell a different story to different people can only be done on scale if you use the help of machines. So one element is depending on what part of the hospitality business you are in, then what machine learning is and what personalization means is different. If you're an OTA or if you're a hotel provider, it's completely different, for example. If you're an OTA, basically what you have is a discovery problem. You have 1 million properties in your OTA. I do a search. How do I get the top 10 that are most likely to make me convert with you? So I have 1 million, I have to select 10 and then another 10. But then if you're a hotel, the user already came to your website. There's no discovery. He discovered you already by whatever means. Now, what is really important is how do I make it obvious that the offer I'm making to you is the right one to make you book with me? what is the right combination of room and service and price that will convince you we are the right provider. And therefore, a lot of the core objectives of OTAs and hotels are the same, but actually the actual tools are very different and cannot be really well exported from one area to the other. They have to build specifically for your specific structure of the funnel in general, right? Another key idea for me is when you talk about personalization is so obvious for hoteliers because that's what you do. Before the internet came about, what you do is you get a guest and you try to treat him in a way that he thinks he's super special and that he or she will come back again as many times as possible. And you want to change whatever it is in your property and in the way you deliver the service to treat her as a queen, right? What we want to do is to apply the same idea to all of the booking process of the user journey, not only on property, but also in the booking stay and also post-stay. So before the first contact you have with the hotel has to already be personalized. And when you leave the hotel, keep that personalization. And if you complete that cycle, then the chances that you are going to establish a long-term relationship is much better. We actually have some numbers to prove that this works. In our work, with the company, we offer a set of tools, as I said, to personalize the booking experience on the website. And we have measured that if you start with a baseline of 100 index, and then you add different personalization techniques, you increase the performance and you actually sell more. You get higher ADR, higher conversion rates, more bookings. And actually, the more techniques you use and the better you use them, the more you can increase that percentage. So there's a clearly correlation between a proper use of personalization and just making more money on the bottom line. I wanted to also share a case study or a more practical approach of how we go about this idea I mentioned of predictive personalization, right? So let me dive into this for a few minutes. When we say predictive personalization, it's because we are putting together two keywords here. The first one is we use machine learning and AI to predict behavior. As we said before, we analyze data, we try to find patterns so that when we see a new user, we understand what he will do next. And then you have personalization. You change the user experience. So if I know what someone wants, then I change the website experience to give it to her. So the sweet spot is both of them. Because if you predict behavior, but then you cannot influence that behavior, it's interesting but useless. And if you personalize without predicting, it's just educate the guesses, but you don't know if it's going to work. So ideally, you want both the prediction and the personalization to work. And it's quite straightforward. Our website is the same for every user. No matter if you, Scott, Enzo, myself, we go to the website, and it will be exactly the same for all of us, right? But when you are using predictive analytics, then every user is different because you're perceiving what they are doing and what they want is different. So if we connect that to revenue management, what we are saying is, well, revenue management ends when we have a price per room per night. Therefore, for May the 1st, I have this price for every one of my rooms and that for every day in the year ahead. But the user is not even there. So how come that if we think that personalizing for the user is key, then in revenue, we don't even ever talk about users? So that's our work. We want to add the user into the equation. We want to work with the existing revenue management techniques where the output is a price per room, and then be able to adapt that to every user so that everyone gets what they want, which increases value both for the user and for the hotel. And that's the key idea. That it has to be sustainable long term. It has to give more value to both the customer and the provider.
I think you make a great point. I think the OTAs educated customers to have multiple web sessions before they purchase, right? And now, unfortunately or fortunately, we've added any place from 10 to 50 search sessions before someone buys. And I think what is inevitable in this is that people will rediscover the use of the incognito mode on their browsers and very quickly as a final test say, okay, am I being personalized for the better or am I being personalized for the worst? And so if a hotel uses that personalization to simply meet their needs and not benefit the guest, I think we're going to find that those hotels are very quickly going to kind of fall out of trust with the customer. because it's quite, the tool is quite simple to see if the personalization is benefiting me or not. It's just to go there anonymously and see if I get the same results or better, or worse. So.
Correct. And I think the idea of personalization for the worst is clearly something that is not going to work. It's impossible to scale. You may get away with it for a while, but people will realize that's something that doesn't work. Yeah, I think you have a baseline, and then it can get better, but it can never get worse. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think it gets into the piece that we may have an opportunity to talk about towards the end when we talk about the future. But it's there's a lot of things we can do with the technology, and I think what's going to start to be increasingly part of the discussion is what should we do? Is that the right thing to do with it? Simply because it can be done doesn't mean we should.
Exactly. For example, if we go into specific uses, because as we said at the beginning, I like to be pretty practical. When we are talking about what you can measure and therefore influence, so you have revenue management with price setting, and then we can measure user intent and user spend. Intent would be how likely someone is to convert to actually book a room with you, and spend is if that user is going to book, would she get the cheapest room or the most expensive one? So basically, how it's her preference for the type of room you're having, and eventually you want to come to the personalized price. What's the ideal price for each customer? And the idea of personalizing is because if you know someone wants a suite, then you only talk about the suite and you don't confuse people with offers for the cheaper room because that's not what they want. And in this world where attention is so scarce, everything you can do to just focus the message on just one thing you're telling them, that's fundamental to understand that. We always discuss with clients and partners how we do this, because as I said at the beginning, it looks like a bit of a black box. Well, what we are tracking, we are trying to make here in this case study a better idea of what we are after, right? So we track what we are trying to understand about user behavior. First thing is past behavior. So everything we can know about someone before they come to the hotel website is useful. If they visited this hotel before, a hotel from the brand, a hotel in the same destination, if they come from an ad campaign or they just type the URL directly, all of that gives us hints about what this person wants. Then we track current behavior. So anything that happens on the hotel website and booking engine. That means that every page, click, content they see, prices they've been shown, rooms they visited, all of the current behavior, because a key assumption of our work in hospitality is that who you are is a much worse predictor of your behavior, of what you want, than what you are doing now. And the reason is that travel in general is a relatively seldom, it's not a very frequent event. I think on average, people travel the ones who book something twice per year. So what you did a year ago, where maybe you were on business, has nothing to do with what you're doing today. And then the third one is THN is our company. THN interactions means that if we are personalizing the experience, we understand how you respond to the personalization. And finally, external data. One of the key assets too is when a user is booking something, he's not booking a hotel in the void. He's looking at everything else. So we need to understand market data on what is your price related to the OTA price, what is your price related to competitors, to the market, in the same destination you are, etc. So we want to understand what you are doing and what is the market looking like while you are looking at that. And finally, the interesting thing in machine learning is you can measure if what you are saying actually works. So the way we do that, and this is the only chart in the presentation, as you see, is to try to understand how well this performs. Just a quick way to understand this chart. If you look at the x-axis, that would be your users. If you're a hotel, you're a property, from 0 to 100% of your users. And then on the left, the y, it's your bookings. So how many bookings those people are doing. If we have an algorithm which was completely random, so it has no idea what's going on, then 50% of the users would do exactly 50% of the reservations. So it would be a straight line from the one corner to the other corner, from the bottom 0, 0 to the 100, 100. The lower that line is, the better the algorithm is performing. And the way you can look at it is by looking at, for example, low intent or high intent people. Low intent users, if you track, for example, that lower 30%, they do only 4% of the bookings. And the top 10 is making almost half of the bookings. If you can understand that, then you can focus on that. For example, for low intent, you have to make sure that they understand that your hotel is a great one, because if you don't do that, they're going to leave. For high intent, they are probably convinced that the hotel is the right one. What you have to understand is, can I give you something to nudge you to the next step and actually complete that reservation? So that's where the personalization part comes up. This is the prediction part, and then you need to have personalization strategies to deliver strategically to every user. And by the way, that's what the people do. The revenue managers and the marketing managers for the hotel chains, that's what they are doing. The algorithm predicts for them, but they are the ones who decide the strategy to respond to every one of those. One thing we've seen as a company is that since we are bringing to the market tools that didn't exist before, we are also helping our clients and hotel experts to respond to those possibilities, because we don't know yet as an industry which is the best way to respond to someone who is a high spender, for example. Someone who is, what is the best strategy to establish a relationship with that person? So there's a learning process for everyone involved in how to respond what we are learning from machine learning.
I think it creates a really interesting, as you mentioned, learning process for the conventional marketers as well. We used to determine market segmentation with what was available. So that would be postal codes, ages, genders, and things like that. Yeah. And as you mentioned, now much more powerful is how those people behave. And I think you'll be able to really create, if we can redesign the way we think well enough, that we can have market segments and understand how to act on market segments based on grouping people on their behavior and not on traits about them. I think we become more refined. Yeah. We actually get away from the privacy invasion that is knowing more and more about the individual, right? And knowing, quite frankly, just more about the behavior profile we're looking for, and letting those people anonymously segment themselves, basically, is what happens. So I think it's a very interesting development that conventional marketers, it's not just a revenue management component. Conventional marketers are going to get more information, but they're going to have to change the titles on the categories that they're used to using in order to be able to use it. It'll be very interesting to see who can kind of follow the time and who gets stuck. It'll be fun to watch.
I totally agree. And I think it's so, once you do it, it's so obvious, by the way, because typical segmentation is, I want to target women between 25 and 35 who like to take care of themselves. Well, how can that be those millions and millions of women that all want the same thing? It's so obvious that it's not the case, right? So I think we were limited to those categories, demographic ones, because that's the only thing we had. It was better than nothing, but now we have other things, right?
Juanjo, can I interrupt the conversation for a quick question from the audience? I got Paul Finnegan asking how can be implemented if it's a complex integration. Is a GM of an independent hotel, so he was looking to understand how can implement this tool of this network.
So in our case, we work with every type of property, from independent hotels to large chains. We have clients with 1 and with 500 hotels, because the product works at the property level. So it works for one specific hotel. And it's pretty easy to implement, actually. It became pretty obvious really quickly that the way to be able to work with many hoteliers was to make the process simple. So the only thing you have to do is to install a line of code in the website. It would be the exact same thing as if you use Google Analytics, just copy and paste a line of code. And that script allows us to understand behavior and then change experience. So you can you can go live with us in 2 or 3 days. And then it's a learning process of understanding what is the best use of the tool, because personalization is a platform and you can do many things with it, but it's really, really easy to use.
I have a personal question on that.
Sure.
Is this tool need also to collect historical data? I mean, from analytics? No, I don't think so, right?
In general, we don't look at the profile of the user before. The moment we start looking at him, we look at what the user is doing now. Yeah. And that's why we don't need to know your name or your email or anything else, because that's who you are, not how you behave.
Yeah. All right, cool, got it. All right, thank you.
Okay, so I only had one more example just to finish the comparison. For those who like basketball, I think this is a pretty good example to understand the influence that machine learning can have of any discipline, right? If you look at what you're looking at is that on the left is 20 years ago, and it's the location on the basketball court from which the players were shooting into the basket. And you can see it's a bit all over the place. But then analytics became so much better that everyone realized in the industry, first the experts and then the coaches and then the players, that there are positions where you maximize the probability of success. So basically, as you see on the right, that's how people are shooting now. It's basically either a simple shot right in front of the basket or a three-pointer. Everything in the middle didn't convert as well. And therefore, everyone got that, understood that, and then they changed their behavior. And you have to keep in mind that these are the best players on earth, the best practitioners of their discipline. And they were really bad at making intuitive decisions. They were making decisions to shoot from all of those places based on their experience, and it was wrong. It was not the best use of their time. And I think this is a great metaphor for all of us, where we think that we've been 20 years doing something, and then we have it covered, and then you look at the numbers, and suddenly, obviously, you got a lot of it right, but there were quite a few points where you could improve. So, yeah.
I think that's a fantastic example for anyone that knows basketball. This analytics changed the game. Used to be that the tall guys stood underneath the basket all the time. Now the tall guys have to go out to that perimeter area and be able to shoot as well. And it's absolutely changed the some of the great basketball players from 50 years ago are just not physically the right players for the way the game is played now, or the way it's evolved. So I think it's an excellent metaphor all the way to the manpower piece for the hospitality industry. Eventually.
Exactly. And by the way, I think it's great to go back to the question originally about if AI is going to replace people. Well, what you see here, the metaphor of AI replacing people would be that 20 years into the future, we have a basketball game where the players are robots. But that is not what happened. What happened is that you have the same players doing smarter decisions, making smarter decisions.
Cool. I want to follow up on something that it sort of goes through your presentation, but I would say that those of us that are not as educated about it as you are, we've sort of made AI and machine learning synonymous, and it's not. There is a difference.
Correct.
So explain the difference.
Yeah. So I tend to use them both, but actually machine learning is a subset of AI. AI would be everything in which you try to replicate how mind works and in general to extract data from and solve problems through machines. And machine learning is a specific process where the machines learn about a given situation to have an algorithm that then does something. So machine learning includes many other things that are, AI includes many things that are not machine learning. For example, building a robot includes machine learning, but has many other things that are not. Yeah.
Okay. And then the next question I have, we talked at the conference a little bit. Revenue management systems have been talked about for years, but the reality is only 15% of hotels currently have a dedicated RMS. So the market is very underpenetrated, and there are some providers that are starting to address different segments of the industry. So as a result of the cloud and things like that, the costs have come down, so it's become accessible for more people. But tell me, how is the uptake so far on applying AI to the process?
So it's very small, because basically I think you can say that our company is clearly at the forefront of this, and in many of our products with AI, we're the only ones in the market in offering something like this. So we are building a market from scratch on top of the other tools, right? In general, it always takes a long time for a tool, no matter how good it is, to actually get massive penetration. It's not only hospitality, in any industry. From the moment that the best practitioners are doing something until it becomes the default option, it's 2 decades. So we are just starting this process. As I said, it's quite a learning process. A lot of what we're doing is also a learning process for us. Some of the things you try work and some don't work, and then you have to keep working, improving them. But I would say we are in the very low digits. I mean, there's probably 1% of the people using this yet. That's why you can get an advantage now that will become a mainstream thing in 10 years.
It's almost like if you find a really, really great place to get your beef from at the hotel, you don't really want to tell everyone, right? So it's no longer a competitive advantage if everyone has the best beef. So I think it's a very interesting. We have to help you get the word out through this avenue. And some of your clients are probably going, please don't tell anyone. But, we don't want anyone to know that this is how we're winning.
That's pretty interesting. So in general, since we want to work with as many hoteliers as possible, we try to never pitch one hotel against another. And it's more about serving the user, because then if you basically want to increase the pie, not to split, change the way the pie is split, right?
Yeah, and I think that as an industry, it was, again, at HSMAI, it's nice that we can get together sometimes and really talk about the health of the industry. And it's almost like, when brothers fight, we have, I think, a vested interest in making sure the family is okay. But when it comes to who's going to get the nicer piece of meat, and then we have a fight. But so tell me, if you don't mind, I want to shift gears on you a little bit and have some fun, if that's okay. And then we'll loop back to where it's going in the future. But let me just ask you a couple of fun questions that kind of fit everyone and very personal. So feel free to, although nothing offensive. And the first one is, when you walk up to your refrigerator and you find a questionable item in the refrigerator, do you read the date or do you trust your nose?
Date.
All right, good. How about your gas tank? How low does your gas tank normally get before you start freaking out and looking for a gas station?
Pretty low.
Pretty low. Okay.
Yeah.
That's got an AI opportunity as well, I think. Clubbing in Ibiza or museums in Paris?
You know what? I have a couple of kids, and it's neither one of those.
Euro Disney. Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go for an all-inclusive hotel somewhere with a pool.
Sweet. Oh, there you go. Exactly. Yeah, that's a nice.
Where you can get the club and the museum at the same place.
Exactly.
Perfect. That's perfect. You can tell them to go get a free hamburger and you can have a cocktail. That's a good way to do it. Water, wine, espresso, or a wheatgrass smoothie?
Espresso, clearly.
Describe your ideal day off.
So I like reading quite a bit. So I always try to find some time to quietly spend some time with espresso and some reading on almost everything, and mostly not work related. I enjoy reading novels a lot, and I'm a big fan of the New Yorker. So I think the quality of the writing is great, and then it opens your mind to so many things. And then obviously spending a lot of time with family.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. What's the best gift you've received recently?
Interesting.
Come back.
You put me on that one.
It's got to be something. I would, just judging by the other things you've said, it's got to be something that you hung on your refrigerator from one of the kids. So
exactly.
Yeah. Right. Favorite hotel in the world and why?
So I'm a big fan of the Mexican hotels. I've spent quite some time there, and they have some amazing properties. I wouldn't name one specifically, but the quality of the hotels in that part of the Caribbean is amazing.
I agree. You mentioned all inclusives. Two versions of travel for me, quite frankly: cultural in a city, or all inclusive in Mexico, where I don't have to think for several days. It's really nice. It's a nice way to travel.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple more quick ones: dogs or cats?
Cats.
Beach or pool?
Pool.
Night owl or early riser?
Night owl by far.
I was going to say that would have surprised me if it had been the other way.
Yeah.
So okay,
it goes with espresso,
Exactly. Espresso, the last name Rodriguez. Though combine those things, definitely that. So now let's shift back to obviously what's important. Spend just the last few minutes on that. Where do you think this is going?
So I think the industry has a lot of room to optimize some processes. Always talking about the client-facing part of it, right? Not talking about operations, which I know nothing about really. Removing this guesswork from the work of a revenue or marketing manager, I think is important. Understanding how to use the technology. There are so many technology offerings that it's really hard for someone to know what's the right one. So we, as people in the industry, as providers, as vendors, we have to be able to educate people and evangelize on the right things, and being not oversell things, because then that people get super confused and don't know how to do it. And obviously, everything at some point, travel went from a luxury thing to become something very popular that anyone can do. I think some of the way hotels are run are still not optimized with all of the tools that we have now. So we had you had cheap flight, and then more people traveled, and then you have cheap tech, and you have to use it to improve that process. So I think that the type of people who are going to work and how they are going to be trained to work in hotels is going to change quite a bit. And some of the things that now look innovative are going to be obvious in 5 years or 7 years.
Gotcha. What caution would you share? What should people be aware of? What should they possibly worry about?
I think when you're talking about technology, it's always that you go into a complex project and it doesn't deliver because it's so elaborate. I think incremental is the way to go. You don't want to completely change everything you're doing, because then you will not understand it actually. So I think that this idea of do something, get results, make the case within the organization, and then try something else. Don't necessarily go for super expensive solutions, because that's probably something of the past. If the pitch is you have to overhaul absolutely everything, that would be strange. So I think that's one of them. This overpromise idea that happens in so many cases, right? AI is a perfect example. There's this idea of the AI winter. I don't know if you ever heard that, where basically for many years nothing happened. So now there's a difference. I think that not only in hospitality, but in many other industries, AI is becoming much more mainstream. But still, it's not like a simple solution to everything. It's just a tool again.
Yeah, cool. Okay, last question for me, kind of open-ended, and we sort of touched on it a little bit. But what advice would you give a hotelier that's contemplating, bringing AI into their business processes?
I think the best way is to give it a try and to test with a test mentality. Do something and try to measure it quickly with quick iterations. More than embarking on a very complex project, try something simple. And then, because this is, I think, really practice makes perfect. So if you try things, eventually you understand it much more. And the next step becomes pretty obvious. So not trying to necessarily understand the full picture of how the world will change in 10 years. You just think 1 year ahead, try something this year. If it works, then you can do something else. When we look at our clients, the ones who are more successful in direct bookings are almost to a fault the ones who started thinking about this the longer ago, because they've been working on the idea of offering something powerful in your direct channel for a long time. And machine learning and AI is one more tool to add to that group.
It's interesting that the term came up, and it really makes sense based on what you talked about earlier. But really, the phrase "beneficial mistake" starts to come into play more, right?
Yeah.
That you can learn a lot from effectively doing something wrong and ultimately move forward from it, which is a cool concept.
That's something we inside the company we do that. Use that language a lot, because the key idea is if everything you do works, it's because you are not risking enough. By default, you have to be making mistakes. It's impossible that every single initiative is successful. It means that you are leaving a lot of money on the table if that's the case.
That I like it. You have to be brave, really, in the hospitality, especially when we are facing now this, switch from human approach to technology. Actually, I have a question now for you, Juanjo. That's from me, and it is more tactical question. Okay, I always say, and I think it's a quite common example of saying, you can have a great car, you can have a Ferrari. If you don't have a good driver, you go nowhere, right? Which means the perfect combination of human and technology. That is going to be the successful, I think, in any kind of industry. So from your experience and by looking at the data, your tool, your clients, what are the most successful clients using predictive analytics from the tactical point of view? I mean, I'm sure that there is part of the tool which make the automation process, but in somehow there is some piece of contents and creativity campaign kind of strategy that have to put in place from the hotel's side, right? So which are the clients that get much more successful by using this kind of approach of predictive analytics?
So what we've seen is clients who already have a good strategy of direct bookings in general are typically the ones who get the most results. And I think it's because the goal is very obvious for them, and they have some experience on the tactics. So when you're applying AI in the way we do it to predict behavior, you don't necessarily need to invent a lot of things. What you're trying to say is, okay, if you know for the type of guest that tends to come to your place, you've done 25 campaigns in the last 5 years, and you know what works and what doesn't, then you take those ideas and you apply to those ideas on top of the existing algorithm. But someone has to know how to motivate the user. The algorithm doesn't understand if you are going to book or not, but it doesn't know if by offering you free upgrade, then you're going to convert 10% more. That you have to try. And that's why the prediction is one part, but then the personalization and testing the personalization is a fundamental part of it. That we insist a lot on clients testing different things, testing campaigns and messages. And not only, and also perks and benefits, but not only, it's any way in which you tell the story in a way that resonates better. So the hoteliers who are great at telling a story are the ones who also are better and using AI to empower that storytelling.
It seems to me like it seems like we should start calling it augmented intelligence, because from what you're describing, I think if you're a dummy, it's not going to help you. But if you're smart, it's going to. So you're going to be smart on steroids to a certain extent. So it's
correct.
Interesting.
Yeah. And doesn't matter if you are a 4-star in the middle of a city or a resort, seasonal resort.
Yeah,
it works in a perfect way.
So what we've seen, and we measure that quite a bit, is that the performance is different in different properties. So not every property behaves the same. And it's not the property itself, it's that the users to every property are different, because the type of people who come to a hotel are not the exact same ones come to another. You can see some differences between resorts and leisure in general and business, in the sense that in leisure and resorts, vacation places, you have more tools to play with. When you are a business location in the middle of a city, the hotel is what it is where it is. It doesn't typically have many additional services. And what a business person is looking for there is relatively straightforward. For resorts, since you're playing with many more tools, you may have activities and cheerleaders and animation and so many other things, then you can use all of that to change the experience a little bit more. So the more variety of things that you can play with, the better.
Sure, of course. I mean, you can bundle offer packages and, of course, compete in a better way also with your distributor, like OTA wholesaler.
Correct.
That will facilitate, the way you build the offer, and by adding some, extra services, included in the price that you are not offering on the third-party channel. So that will may help. That might help, to increase the conversion.
One of the amazing things I think it has an opportunity to do for us in the resort setting is really understand the competitors. Quite often, we look at resorts and we think we compete against the other beach resorts that are around us. But the reality is, when we choose a vacation, I'm already looking at hotels before I even choose where I'm flying to. So I think it's going to help us really understand a much better, who are customers considering when they're considering us. And I think it's going to be very enlightening for people, because we have a very sort of geographically limited competitive set mentality for the most part in the industry, and I think there's going to be information that's going to give us an opportunity to challenge those norms that comes from AI, which is really cool.
Yeah, and then creativity is really important. So if we are giving the industry tools, then someone has to use those tools. We are going to help, but eventually, no one knows a property better than the property manager.
Yeah, for sure.
I have one point here again, guys, from Adele Goodman. I don't know if you know Adele. She's she's going to be actually a guest speaker tomorrow to another session. Okay. Adele, she's the vice president of the collection, library collection in New York. So it's an amazing group. Anyway, she's saying, I love Hotel Network and I'm looking forward to learning more about testing it. I do have a concern about adding things to the website and booking engine and in interfacing with the speed. What suggestion do you have to avoid slowing down of the site speed?
Yeah. So I know Adele actually in the library collection is a client of ours. So we've been working together for a while. So Adele's question is important when you are talking about improving the website experience. Since the way our product works is by adding something, you have to make sure that adding something doesn't slow the experience. That's why in general, you always want to add the new content, the way you tell the story after the core experience. So first you load everything that needs to be loaded and so that if someone wants to do something quick, they can. And then after that is when you add your stuff. So from the point of view of the user, you first see the conventional website and then you add the notches and the additional story you want to do. So it's key that it never interferes with the normal experience. And by the way, one of the key elements is that the more, so you always, when you are trying to motivate people by influence their behavior.
Your audio went off, Juanjo. Oh, we can't hear you. It's off. I think you removed the headphone. Maybe that's why.
Okay, now?
You're back, yeah.
Okay, sorry. So I was saying that there's always a trade-off when you are influencing behavior between how in your face you are and how subtle you are. So when you become part of the website, we have a tool that we call inliners, where you can add content within the website that looks native. Or you can have a layer, like an overlay, telling the same thing. An overlay is always going to be more impactful, but it doesn't look so much as part of the website. So it depends on what you want to stress. Are you going for a more promotional approach to get more people to pay attention, or are you going for a more subtle approach? And you can do both. And what we encourage clients is to test both. And in some cases, the more quiet approach can work, but in some cases, if you want just have something powerful, then you may want to say it aloud. Which saying out loud doesn't mean being too promotional or ugly at all. It's just that you make sure you're going to capture attention.
Gotcha.
You make a great point about testing too. I think that AI is going to help us. We do A/B testing. I think we're going to be able to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G testing in the future as a result of being able to use the automation to help us understand how each of the variables impact us. It's big.
That's a good point. Actually, I always say A/B, but actually the tool can do multivariant texting. Only that in general you need so hotels are not huge in terms of usage. If you compare a hotel to Netflix or Amazon, the number of users you have is tiny, and therefore you have to control exactly the type of test you're doing. But for larger properties, there's a bunch you can do.
Yeah. Right, guys. I got a lot of viewers today. We got more than 60 viewers real time, and it's obvious that the contents were really get traction and interest. It's always hard on topics, direct sales. Thanks Juanjo to join us today. Thanks Scott to moderate brilliantly as usual this session. And well, guys, at this point I can leave you go back to your work. And thanks again everyone for watching Master Predictive Analytics, and we'll see you soon today with another episode of Master together with Diego Fernandez from Palladium Motel Group. I got another live session also tomorrow with the photo is actually the third episode, and Adele is going to be with us. And thank you guys. Thank you, and see you soon.
Thanks, Juanjo. Thank you, Enzo. Have a great day, guys.
Bye. 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 Bye.